Hi there, my name's Christian and I'm one of the pastors here at City Church. Now I've got an Easter message for you today that I actually gave last week at our fish pond site, but we've had a few requests to get it recorded, so here it is. I'm going to start with our passage, which is Luke chapter 24 verses 1 through 12. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly two men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen. Remember how he told you, while he was still with you in Galilee, the Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again." Then they remembered his words. When they came back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. But they did not believe the women, because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away wondering to himself what had happened. Now, as a lot of you who know me know, many of my hobbies and interests might be described as a bit niche. But one of my favourite genres is sci-fi, and I especially love the subgenre that is called cyberpunk. Now, this is a setting that's been made famous in many films and games and comics now over the years. Things like Judge Dredd, Blade Runner, the hugely successful computer game Cyberpunk 2077, says it in the name, and of course the Matrix series of films. Maybe you've seen some of these films, maybe they're some of your favourite sort of films and media. Doesn't matter whether you have or haven't actually, because today's sermon is Easter, the glitch in the Matrix. Now, as I say that, some of you will already have a sense of where I might be going. Some of you have no idea. Don't worry, you'll miss out on very little. I'll take you along on the journey with us. But a quick word about some of the more negative links that have been made to concepts in the Matrix films recently, some negative connotations we're seeing in media these days. I'm not going to go into any of the nitty-gritty, but we have the whole red pill, blue pill notion that you might have heard of that's been adopted by those in the manosphere, as Louis Theroux's recent documentary explored. Now, we're not looking at any of that whole scene today, although I'd love to do that in a future sermon. No, today I want to use the world setting in these Matrix films to help us understand the resurrection account. Because when it comes to us understanding ancient writings like we've just read, very often using metaphors of more familiar things like films and literature help us to plug in and connect with what's going on. Now, The Matrix is a great set of films, actually, with the basic idea of it being, and this is spoiler-free, the world we live in, live our daily lives in, it's actually a simulation called The Matrix. And we all live in this super program, but the reality is different. There's a world outside of that matrix. In the films, occasionally we get a glimpse of this real world when something breaks in from outside of the Matrix simulation. And in the films, this is called a glitch in the Matrix. And that's a phrase that you might have come to know, but not even realise where it came from. Now, the thing about cyberpunk settings is they all have this very negative, dark, dystopian vision of the future. What I found startling, though, is that as I began to list all of the common tropes that we see in these settings, I realised they're all features of our world setting now. So I'm going to use the genre to diagnose the problem that so many of us can feel in our own lives, in the soul of the city that we live in the soul of our world, as it were. Because I don't think cyberpunk is just sci-fi anymore. It's become the evening news. We do live in an increasingly high-tech, low-life reality in 2026. And so today we're going to look at the resurrection, not as a religious fairy tale, but as a glitch in the Matrix. And a glitch that acts like a system override, and that gives us hope. So let's look at the problem first, though. When you're trying to work out what's gone wrong with a computer, what's gone wrong with the system, you run a diagnostic on it. So let's run the diagnostic on our world in 2026. I've got something here I've called it the tick list, because we do live in a sort of cyberpunk reality. Number one, the corporate sovereignty. Massive multinational corporations control everything in these cyberpunk settings, and they often have more power than governments. Well, in 2026, tick. I mean, we don't just buy from companies, we live in their ecosystems. They have more data on us than certainly we have on them, and probably on ourselves. Number two, the AI shadow. The ever-present threat is here. We're genuinely questioning what's human, what's real, and what really matters in a world of algorithms now. Number three, the robot labourer. In some cyberpunk settings, android robots do all the labour, leading to humans being put out of work, and then they're often left feeling purposeless. Are we all going to lose our jobs to robots and AI? And of course, it's not just factories. It's our services, our art, music and writing. I mean, even dance, if you saw the recent Chinese robots doing the martial arts. We can easily think that the human is being squeezed out. What about number four, the global nervous system? All of my systems are nervous, you might say. A ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal, or conflict flares in the Strait of Hormuz, and the price of milk in a Tesco Metro on the corner of your road here in our city spikes. We're hyper-connected, but hyper-vulnerable. Number five, the economic instabilities. Way before Bitcoin, I can remember playing an online game called EverQuest 25 years ago now, in the very early days of online gaming. And I can remember then how staggered we all were that you could go online and use real money to buy currency for use in the game world, like a virtual currency. And the exchange rate for that was better than some countries' real-world actual cash. Suddenly, the virtual had more value than the real. And we all know where that's got to nowadays with cryptocurrency and the rest. Number six, the decay, that high-tech low life I talked about. We have people sleeping on a spaceship going up to the moon and back, and we've got people sleeping in doorways. Here we have the peak of human tech, and yet we also have the peak of human exploitation, the peak of connectivity, and yet the absolute lack of real connection. Number seven, the environment. In cyberpunk literature, the planet is often cast as a dying world, grinding down into decay. Something that some of us have come to fear for our Earth. We can argue about how far along the process is, but many of us have fears around this. Number eight, last one, death by screen. Personal communication devices they were literally sci-fi 40 years ago. And now, we pretty much all have access to one here in the West, and yet they seem to be conduits for all the worst stuff to come into us and leave us overloaded, mentally shot, confused, and sometimes depressed and despondent. The story of civilization is that with progress, we were promised a utopia, but we've ended up in this sort of cyberpunk dystopia. And the worst part? Like the women dejectedly walking towards the grave on that Easter Sunday morning, we've just become prepared for the metaphorical funeral of it all. This is the world that we walked or drove through to go to work this morning, or to go and see friends, or that it's the world we woke up in. We aren't surprised at the news anymore. Many of us have resigned ourselves to thinking that the system's rigged, that the world is crashing, that death is obviously the only end point in the story. And if we haven't resigned ourselves to that, we end up spending each day fighting that sense of creeping dread, especially if the news agencies are to be believed. Well, there's a cracking Easter sermon, Christian. You've left me feeling really uplifted here. Listen, it's really good to acknowledge the challenge that we're all facing. How do we have hope in the face of all this? Because as mental health difficulties skyrocket, especially amongst the young, who should be the most hope-filled of us, many of us are living out a sort of grinding hopelessness day after day. The women walking to that tomb 2,000 years ago, they might not have understood about failing world systems and dystopian futures like we do, but they did understand that their future looked dark and that their hope had gone, because they'd laid their hope in a tomb a few days earlier, the one that they were walking towards now. They just, frankly, like many people in our world today, had lost their hope. The thing is, the system override is coming. The women went to the tomb with spices to embalm the body of Jesus because they were following the code of this world. We know how it all works, and so we're always prepared for the worst. We see the homelessness, the corporate greed, the brokenness, and we are tempted to think that's just the way it is. Oh, some good people manage to do a bit here and there about it, but really, that's the funeral reality of our world. And actually, if you look in the Bible, this bleakness is reflected there. We could look to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 19 and 20 says, "Surely the fate of human beings is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust all return." Or what about Job chapter 14, 1 and 2? It says, "Mortals born of woman are a few days and full of trouble. They spring up like flowers and wither away, like fleeting shadows. They do not endure." In this world's programming, things that break stay broken. People who die stay dead, and we all just keep trudging on, heads down. We prepare our spices for the crash of our mental health, the failing of the next relationship, or something else going wrong. Why? Well, because that's what's happened before. And this can lead us to think that this is all there is to the real world. And as the writer of Ecclesiastes states, isn't it all just meaningless? But then, the small matter of the empty tomb, this glitch in the matrix. If this Jesus really has risen from the dead, that would show us that there is more than what we understand reality to be. Death is a universal law, until it isn't. If Jesus walked out of that grave, then he just ripped a hole in the fabric of what we thought was possible. The angels, in speaking to the women, basically tell them, "You're looking at the wrong version of the world. You aren't seeing the greater reality at play here. Why are you looking for the living amongst the dead?" And for the women, they're like, does not compute at first. Okay, now perhaps you're thinking, hang on, Christian, are you actually saying that you think a Jewish man 2,000 years ago was raised to life from being 100% certifiably dead? Now you're glitching, mate, because that is nonsense. If you're thinking that, you're in good company, because that's exactly what the disciples here thought too. You know, the ones who started this whole gig after Jesus, the ones who we have stained glass windows of now. Verse 11, it says, "Look, but they did not believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense." The word for nonsense in Greek, what the New Testament was written in, is leros, literally rubbish. Okay, when the women came back saying Jesus had risen from the dead, the guys called it leros, trash, nonsense. But that's because their brains are still, it's like they're running an old operating system. Their old tech has no way to interface with the new code that's just been introduced into the system. And so what do? Oh, they just sat there, arms folded, saying, "This is all nonsense, girls." They scoff because, of course, they know they're far too smart to believe in a resurrection, because they know how this system, how this world operates. They react like many of us would. We can be sure that our understanding of this matrix is perfectly full. Thank you very much. Glitches like this just don't happen. It is a nonsense. And now I sound like Richard Dawkins. The thing is, when he sticks his nose in the air and says, "Nonsense, it's just not interesting," that doesn't appear enlightened anymore. but actually quite close-minded. And the thing is, there's Peter. He thinks, what if... Well, I better find out for myself. I can see him in my head, unfolding his arms, getting up, putting his trainers on, and then he starts running. What's going on? Just going on around his head. The cynic stays home because they've already decided how the story ends without exploring it for themselves. Peter thinks, well, I don't know, but I'm going to at least find out for myself. In fact, let's contrast the two. The cynic stays put, while Peter goes and investigates. See, I think if my life was perfect, I'd be tempted to stay sat on my backside too. Why would I go and explore and risk this perfectly perfect life? The thing is, none of us are really living that life, let's be honest. We all live in the funeral reality. Each of us know we want more out of life. We might drink deep from the well of this life, but we just keep getting thirsty again. Staying put in that reality, it just doesn't seem very sensible. And the disciples themselves, they're all sat in a room scared for their lives after Jesus had been crucified and buried in that tomb. Life wasn't looking great. It actually makes much more sense for Peter to go and explore for himself. Now, is this you, the cynic? Is that where you want to be? Perhaps your life isn't so great right now. I know how that feels. That was definitely part of my story. And so perhaps it is a very reasonable and sensible idea to explore this glitch in the matrix after all. The cynic sits arms folded, shaking his head. Peter gets the old Nikes on. For us cynics, because this is how I'm most naturally wired to be, our world has become disenchanted to us because we believe the lie that we know how all of this works now, thank you very much. The danger of that is that it's like a closed-mindedness has infected our systems. We put up the firewalls when people of faith come along talking nonsense, that Leros rubbish, because we don't want to get infected with that crazy faith mind virus. I think we need to be careful not to just choose a reality where death wins. If a glitch in the matrix did happen, it bears investigation at the very least, like Peter. Jonathan Pajot, he's a Canadian writer and an artist and also he's very good on all of this. But he would point out that there are many, many, many things that we can't prove, but we still live as though they are reality. Let's take a simple one. I can't prove scientifically that my wife Michelle loves me. Like, there's no test that we can do. But it is very much, thankfully, the reality that I live in daily. See, we each of us live inside a reality that is full of things we cannot prove, but we still live with them as our reality. For the Christian, we live in a different reality to the dystopian vision that is forming around us. We see through it to a greater reality. And the resurrection is what gives us that glimpse through the code of the matrix, as it were. Now, I think the challenge for some of us Christians is that we might talk about understanding that there's more to the world than meets the eye, as they say, but yet, despite mentally understanding and believing in the reality-changing implications of this resurrection, over time, we find ourselves living less and less in a world of renewed wonder. And we find ourselves back to trudging along, distracted by all the immediate challenges, snowed under by deadlines and emails, and just struggling under the weight of our material life, our material possessions, or lack of them. Do you know what a patch is? In computer terms, it's like a small update to a program or an app, making corrections, fixing bugs, maybe introducing some new content. Some of us who follow Jesus are in danger of treating the glitch in the matrix, of treating our faith as like a small patch. Yeah, we've got some of our bugs fixed that were messing up the program of our life. There's some new content in life now. I read my Bible and I pray, unlike before. We might interact with some new users on a Sunday when we go to church, but it's still just a patch updating the same old program. Or am I living as a new creation, as the Bible calls it, understanding that something about my entire operating system has now changed? Even just myself the other day, I got all stroppy and short-tempered because I had to do a bunch of life admin stuff on my day off, a thing many of you can probably identify with. And I had to stop and catch myself. Like, what reality am I choosing to live in? One where I have to grab all of the enjoyment and the happiness now, and I get all funky when something gets in the way of that, because this is all I have, this funeral reality, or one where I have an eternity ahead of me to enjoy all the best things. Am I running just a patch? Or a new operating system, a new way of interacting with everything? See, ultimately, I think it all boils down to hope. The dark grey skies of these cyberpunk worlds discourage you from ever looking up in hope. Because what is there except the dark grey void of space? The Christian story that we get to inhabit gives us all the reason to do exactly that, to look up, to look to God, who's just metaphorically up there, of course, who is outside of all of this, of space and time. Of course, we can't prove he's there. We're inside it, giving this material world meaning and purpose and implanting hope in us. You know, we aren't then just bags of DNA floating on a rock in an uncaring universe. No, you are loved. And you can have hope and meaning and purpose because you are made in the image of God. Each one of us are, as just the second chapter of the Bible tells us. Now you might say, well, Christian, is it really reasonable to believe that there is hope when the world is so messed up? The glitch points to something. The reality is that there is a sort of virus that does infect us all. None of us are perfect. We all do things we can hardly believe we've done sometimes. The things we've said, the things we've done, often to loved ones, or not done when we should have. And this is all of us. And the virus of all of this mess, that's what the Bible calls sin, it needs to be sorted. It needs to be purged if things are ever going to change. And this is where Jesus comes in for us. Jesus took the entire system's corruption into himself on the cross. In a very cyberpunk move, right? He let the system kill him so he could crash it from the inside. Good Friday looks like defeat, but it's the start of the end for the virus that infects us all. The resurrection then, of course, is the reboot. It's the restart. In fact, Jesus is actually called a new Adam. Adam and Eve, remember in the story of the Garden of Eden, they ate the fruit, did what they wanted to do rather than what God had taught them to do. And so in doing what they essentially ended up doing in that, I suppose, is like switching off all of the antivirus and just letting it all in. Every time I used to check my old man's PC, he'd never run any decent antivirus, and he'd click anything and everything that flashed on his screen. He didn't know any better, so he'd just click in it. And so his PC was always crawling with Trojans and all sorts. It was a right mess. Some of us live life in this way. We click on everything, even the obviously dodgy things, and then we wonder why we feel like a mess. The cross is the virus purge. But the resurrection is the reboot, a new start, available to each of us. Now, as I end, if you maybe identify more with the skeptic, sitting arms folded, the invitation of Easter is to unfold the arms, put the old Nikes on and have an explore. You might feel like you're living with an infected system, desperate to find a thing that will sort of set to factory default almost and give you a new fresh start. This is what the glitch in the matrix that is the resurrection reveals is possible for each of us. Remember, Easter isn't a demand for certainty. It's an invitation to curiosity, to start exploring for yourself. do an alpha. Ask a Christian you know to read the Bible with you. Get in touch with us here at City Church. We'd love to help you work out what some next steps could be for you. And if you're petering it in life and you're exploring what it is to follow Jesus and you feel like you've had life rebooted, you can combat the temptation to live as though it's just a patch by telling your story. You see, if we read on into the book of Acts, that's what Luke wrote next. That's what the disciples did. They told their story of their experience of this Jesus everywhere they went. We should too, to friends and family, and whenever anyone asks, like in 1 Peter 3:15, like I spoke on just a couple of weeks back. Because I think it will bring hope to others who are living in this increasingly dystopian cyberpunk world that is 2026. All of us need to live with hope. Let me pray for us. Jesus, I thank you so much that you were the glitch in the matrix, that your life, your death, and your resurrection have revealed to us that there is more than meets the eye, that the reality of what we see is greater. And I thank you that whilst we see so much in the world that causes us pain and sadness and fear, Lord, that the reality of you and the reality of a future in you is one that overcomes all of that darkness. And I pray for those of us who are listening, those of us who find ourselves trudging along, heads down, feeling the world grinding down around us. I pray that as a result of this Easter time, would we be able to lift our heads and look to you, as the Bible says, the author and perfecter of our faith. And would you take us to that place, that understanding of seeing the world in a new way and getting to know new life in you. Lord Jesus, I pray this in your name. Amen.